really proud of the fact that Australia had managed to build 65 AC1s and 3 experimental tanks, E1, E2, E3, and they had started building a large number of AC3s. Luckily, the Australian War Memorial has preserved the only AC3 that was built as a complete tank, but with a 25-pounder in it. The AC4, which is now nicely presented as a AC4 tank with the 17-pounder in it, now at the Cairns Armour and Artillery Museum. It is looking magnificent. I was scrounging Druin South, a place called Taparum, and it was a wonderful treasure trove of tanks. The Hayward brothers had been buying up tanks. They were not dealers, they were farmers. In the middle of all this was this marvellous, different-looking tank, and it was the Aussie cruiser tank. It was the E1, the beginning of the Australian cruiser series. I didn't realise it at the time, but I thought that this looks interesting, this should be saved. So we brought E1 home and I stuck it in the yard. We'll look at that later. And so about 40 years later, I had it outside the museum here as a sort of an outside display because there was no top to it. About 5 years ago, I thought, I think it's time that I had a go at restoring this tank. I think I was 92 when I started. and when I started, there were no tracks on it, no sprockets. The tank needed another final drive, and I found a housing, put all the gears and stuff in it, beautiful gears, beautiful machining and stuff, all straight cut teeth. I did this butte restoration, this final drive, offered it up to the axle housing, and 2/3 of the holes were half a hole out. And unfortunately, it was a heavy-duty housing. The holes in the housing are 3 inches long, so I couldn't elongate them. So I'd hunt around and I found another housing, one of the early housings, where the flange is only about an inch thick, and I was able to get the gas axe out, elongate 2/3 of the holes. So if you have a look at E1 now on the right-hand side, the final drive was bolted on with big washers. I was lucky I had a full set of sprockets, full set of tracks. The trouble is the tracks were being rolled up, I guess about 50 years ago, into 6 rolls, 1 metre in diameter. But they'd rusted solid. So that was a fairly difficult job. But I like a challenge like that, to straighten all the bits that were up like that. And then I had to turn it upside down because all the bits that were down, then they were sticking up. And my workshop, there's a story there with no words. It's a wheelbarrow, chock-a block full of empty cans of WD-40. I had to start thinking outside my square. And I went to see Ewan, a good friend of mine, and he suggested JP from JP Marine Industries, who makes marvellous yachts, and he's a boatman, but expert fiberglass.
Straight away, it's like, we can certainly do that.
And I wasn't that keen on a fiberglass tank, but the facilities required to make a cast steel tank top is just too big. It's too big a job.
I spent a lot of time reading Mike Cecil's book and also Jason from up at Cairns, his book. I bought a copy of his book. Just studying the photographs, getting my head around it, coming out here, measuring the hull, getting that as close as we could. You know, there's a few little things here and there, but just getting all that side of it. We got the pattern makers involved. They came out here as well. They were able to measure it up, and then we were able to convert it into a three-dimensional model on a computer.
They've got special machines. I don't understand much of it. Eventually, you get a big chunk of plastic, and they cut it roughly to shape, and then put it in this huge machine, and there's a high-speed end mill running off information being fed into it by this mysterious 3D thing, and it machines the mould exactly the right size to cast up the turret, the driver's compartment, the turret compartment, and the rear engine deck. I had pretty much confidence in JP. I'd sort of checked it a bit, several visits down there, and when the thing eventually arrived, see the bottom half of the hull is cast in three pieces, and the original top was cast in three pieces. So we only brought down the top three pieces, and they had to fit on the bottom original cast steel pieces. That's the two sides of the hull and the rear of the hull. Well, everything fitted exact. Very satisfying for everything to fit nicely. He's a very good engineer, very good boat builder, whatever. So I'm happy with the results. And it's the first time that thing's moved in 83 years. I heard about this tank at Wargunya, which is on the Murray River in Victoria. And I discovered this pretty complete hull, except the back had been cut out of it, but it had a few wheels on it. It was in a wood heap. So in those days I didn't have any financial means to transport it. So I contacted a tank man from Wangaratta, Ken Lucas. We became pretty good friends. So I borrowed Ken's Blitz crane, horrible old things. I had to drive it from Wangaratta to Wargunya and use the crane to lift it and put a few wheels on it and drag it out of the wood heap and out to the front where Ken could pick it up. I did a deal with him. I couldn't pay him, but everybody with grants in Australia was running out of tracks. I had a good set, so I swapped him a good set of grant tracks, as you do, for transporting this Aussie cruiser tank from Wargunya down to Belgrave South. A few days later, Ken arrives, pouring with rain, with this beautiful Aussie cruiser, number 8006. So I had to get the Dodge running, run the winch on the thing, and of course Ken had no provision to rear load. Those old days, you side loaded everything, so we had to drag the thing sideways. Well, of course, being wet and muddy, it was easier to drag it sideways off his float up the muddy bank to my place. Oh, yeah. Anyway, it was an interesting beginning of the AC1 series. I wanted to get it running, and later on I had discovered a complete power pack out of a AC1 up in the hills behind Yarra Glen, and a couple of young guys there had been using tanks to do their logging business, and anyway they must have decided that the Aussie Cruiser power pack wasn't suitable for what they wanted to do, so it was lying around abandoned out the back of their shed. So I finished up buying this Aussie Cruiser power pack, which is a complete power pack. It's 3 Cadillac engines mounted 2 side by side and 1 behind on a subframe, and they had fuel tanks and radiators all mounted on this subframe so that they could remove the power pack. I mean, you know, all modern tanks are complete power pack that you can pick out. This was pretty much a worldwide first. Great praise to the Aussie tank designers that they built it so that complete power pack could be lifted out of the tank and worked on. Anyway, I got the thing running and managed to get it put it back into this AC1 Hull. Yeah, I was able to assemble it all up and get it running. Anyway, we sold up in 06, and number 8006 was bought by a local dealer, and he sold it off to Jacques Littlefield in the US. He was running a huge privately owned museum. It was huge. He was a multi-millionaire, so he could afford to run a. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years later, and the war gamers, they bought this Aussie Cruiser tank, and when they were finished with it, it was transferred across to Rob Loudon's Armour and Artillery Museum in Cairns, and that's where it is now at the present moment. It was a running tank when I sold it, but I think it is yet to be rebuilt and reconditioned, and good luck to them. That's the AC1. AC3 was going to be the best of the tanks because they decided that we could fit a pretty good anti-tank gun in it. I had the job of recovering this AC3 I knew was on the range. That was the one that it's seen in the background of the photo of the AC3 turret, and the guy told me where he got it from. So I had to make contact with the range and get permission to go and have a look. And there were 2 holes buried out on the range. They'd half buried them, and they'd filled them full of dirt because they were going to be targets on the anti-tank range. And judging by the size of the holes that were in the hole, would be a 6-pounder anti-tank range. Anyway, I got permission to go up and recover this historic tank. It's only the second AC3 tank in the world. There's only one, and that's at Canberra. So I thought, right, if I put in a fair bit of effort, I can save this tank. Just a hull, just a casting. And anyway, I took my wrecker, which was the M816. I used to drive in the army, the 4th 19th Prince of Wales Light Horse. I was at Recce Neck there for 26 years. Anyway, Bill, my son, came with me. He had 20 years as a recovery mechanic in the same regiment. And an old truckie friend. And we roll up out on the range, the tilt bed trailer, and there's this tank hull, half buried and full of dirt. So I'd brought 2 winch cables with me. They're 200 yards each. So that's 600 yards of winch cable. Had to hook it all together, anchor the poor old winch. And they said, you can't stand beside the tank in case when you disturb it, a UXB might go off. You've got to stay up at the wrecker behind a heap of sandbags. So we started winching, and we broke the winch cable 4 times, trying. The last time we had to manually dig all the dirt out of the hull and get a 50-ton jack under one side and lift the thing up 6 inches. And anyway, we winched it onto the trailer, and I thought, well, hang on a minute, there might be a few more treasures in amongst all the scrub. And we found 2 turrets, one good one and one the explosive guys had blown the side out of. But worth bringing home. So not only did I bring home an AC3 hull, I brought home 2 turrets. And so, that was the starting of another big job. Righto, so we got it into the workshop, and a friend of mine, Gary Zimmer, he helped me restore the AC3. The trouble is that the hull had been impacted not only by 6-pounder anti-tank rounds, solid shot, but they must have been firing 25-pounder HE at it, because even though the hull is 1 3/4 thick and it's about 3 foot deep, it was distorted, had about 2 inches of distortion in it, and so it made up a 50-ton porta power, lots of chains, and tried to straighten it out. You'd bend it a bit and it'd spring back again. So I thought, right, I'll oxy-cut it in a few places, put the press on it again, and once again it'd just spring back. So the decision had to be made, try and find a good side. So I had to get on to Ian Lee, which an old mate of mine. He had a good AC1 hull up on his farm. So I had to cut the side out of this AC1, cut the side out of the AC3, put the straight sides in. Luckily the sides already had holes drilled for the suspension. Oh, that's a bonus. There were no holes at all drilled in the AC3 hull. When I went to put the transmission, the AC3 transmission, it's a special. None ever been seen, but I managed to get the gearbox and clutch. One of the Hayward brothers had a transmission down there, axle housing. Oh, righto. So I had to drill all the holes in the front of the hull with a 3/4 Black & Decker with 6 feet of pipe and a jerry can full of water running on a pretty big job. Anyway, Gary Zimmer helped me all the way through. I think it took us 9 months to restore that tank to running condition. I'm pretty happy with that, and I had it set up in my museum beside the AC1, number 6 AC1, and the AC3 beside it. The AC4 Replica, which is now nicely presented as a AC4 tank with the 17-pounder in it, is nicely displayed now at the Cairns Armour and Artillery Museum. The origin of that tank is that originally it was probably auction at Bandiana, Wodonga, was driven by these young loggers from Yarra Glen, driven down to Yarra Glen and used in their job of snigging logs out of the bush. I came into the story fairly late because when I came to Yarra Glen chasing this tank, there was only a power pack there. Oh, righto, so I bought the power pack. But the tank was gone. And I found out later that the Puckapunyal Tank Museum had obtained it from these young logging contractors. So they didn't need a second Aussie cruiser tank. They already had a very good one there. I discovered this tank lying unloved and unwanted in the graveyard, and I think at that stage, probably late 80s, early 90s, Pucka haven't been able to save a Stewart tank. I had a good Stewart, so I approached them and eventually we did an exchange. I got a nice Stewart and I finished up with this rusty old Aussie cruiser. Number 40, Puckapunyal were part of the deal, apparently, was that they transported it. Pretty scary because they came through the hills with this Aussie cruiser sitting on the back of a Mack wrecker and a 4-axle recovery trailer, and they'd come down the hill from Belgrave South. By the time it got to my place, the Ferodo brakes were smoking and you could smell the brakes. Anyway, they were able to get it through the gate and unloaded at what was going to be the Melbourne Tank Museum. I dragged it around to my graveyard and that's where it stayed for quite a few years. But I was able to use the turret off it. The turret off number 40 finished up being on number 68006. The people at the Cairns Australian Armour and Artillery Museum recognised the fact that there should be a replica of what would have been one of the best tanks in the European conflict, which was the AC3 with a 17-pounder anti-tank gun mounted in an AC3 turret. They came to visit me and they found that I had a complete hull, an AC1 hull, number 40, 8040, and they recognised that the AC3 turret that I had lying around was suitable to put on the AC1 hull as a replica. And I had all this in my yard. Oh, they were pretty happy about that. And lo and behold, I had a complete 17-pounder anti-tank gun, complete with breech block. And so they were able to negotiate. I can't remember what sort of deal we did, but it was a satisfactory deal. So they took away the last of my AC Australian Cruiser tank series that I'd saved. So they took away the hull, the turret, the gun, and they did a marvellous job of assembling it all up, and it's now on display at the Cairns Tank Museum. So I feel happy about the fact that I've saved E1, I've saved number 8006, the AC3, the last one, all the bits and pieces that I'd saved over the years. Rob Loudon, in his magnificent museum up in Cairns, was able to restore the last tank that I'd saved. So I feel pretty happy. I've saved the 4 Aussie Cruiser series tanks: E1, AC1, AC3, AC4. Hooray for the Australians that did all that work to build those tanks. We were in dire trouble with the Japs coming down the southwest Pacific area. I'm just proud that I was able to save these Aussie wonderful pieces of history. Thanks again.